We're committed to achieve near target times set by the Science-Based Target Initiative. This means reducing our Scope 1 and 2 emissions by 50% and Scope 3 emissions by 85% by 2030. And we're also committed to helping our clients in their decarbonization effort. And you'll hear today more about some of our practices in the talks to come later. But overall, I think this will not work if we don't collaborate. And so I think that's going to be the message for today, for the summit, for the Green Software Foundation, and for the global efforts of decarbonization that we all have to do. We have to collaborate on this. So make this the theme of the day, let's say. So I'm really happy, and we're really happy to have you here and online. Please don't hesitate to let us know how we can make this a pleasant experience for everyone. So that means that please take note that we have a code of conduct in our offices and online. You can find it by using your favorite web search engine with keywords Thoughtworks Code of Conduct. But in short, we expect people to be professional, to treat each other equally and with respect. And that means we have no tolerance for harassment of any kind. We want you to be safe, healthy, and alert. And if you have any concerns or would like to report something, please feel free to do so to reach me, Julian Desworth, or Daniel Frater, or Monica Calderaro. We will be happy having you here. And in terms of health and safety, for those in the office, we have bathrooms that are behind this wall here on my left, on your right, or at the back of the office, same thing, same setup. There are genderless bathrooms. We also have emergency exits. There's one right behind you there. It's a black door. It's right next to the entrance, the glass doors. Please use that if you hear the emergency sign. And we have a similar one exactly at the opposite of the building on the other side. That's it for me today. Enjoy this event and see you soon.
All right. I think we can start with the introduction. Maybe as an introduction to the introduction, how this is going to be structured. We're going to have a session that goes over some basics about the foundation, you know, how it's built, a little bit of the progress that has happened in the past year, its mission, purpose, etc. Then we're going to go and have kind of like a knowledge normalization, you know, set the common ground of, you know, some concepts regarding green software engineering, some of its principles. And then we're going to have a couple of amazing speakers that are going to, you know, take the floor and talk about their topics. Also for the online audience, if you're nearby, there's still a couple of chairs empty. Feel free to join us in the Barcelona office. And yeah, I think that's it. So yeah, introduction to the GSF. It's quite handy that the mission is right there, building a trusted ecosystem of people, standards, toolings, and best practices for green software. We're going to see what green software means. And as a first disclaimer, this is something that, you know, it's quite novel. It's quite new, and it's emerging. We're working ourselves through definitions and what are the meaning of some of these things. That's the main purpose of an event like this one, right? To foster the community, to learn from each other, to see if we can find common ground, build patterns, principles, etc. Okay, now a little bit of the vision, change the culture of building software across the global tech industry, so sustainability becomes a core priority. Right? So we build software for reliability, for availability, and a couple of other utilities. And sustainability has joined this the small table of what needs to be considered when developing software, basically, right? When operating it as well. So why does the foundation exist, and a little bit of the structure, but the why first, right? So we have this trusted ecosystem that comes along and tries to put together standards, toolings, principles, and practices. And all that happens through collaboration, and the purpose of the foundation is to foster that collaboration, to nurture it, to grow it, and also to increase the market size, right? To make sure that as we move forward in time, more people in the market with our skills as technologists have this already incorporated into their skills. The products and services that we build are already designed with this in mind, and so on and so forth. This is a visual aid of the structure of the foundation. So it has 4 working groups: standards, policy, open source, and community. They're all guided by a steering committee in which we sit, and everything is being guarded and guided overall by the Linux Foundation. So a little bit of the progress and roadmap for the past year. A lot has happened. This is kind of like the landscape of who is represented in the foundation. The foundation operates in over 190 countries, global workforce of 1.5 million people, and you can see some of the steering members, founding members, of which we are part of, and some of the other general members. And there is expected growth as trends project in terms of organizations that are joining the foundation itself as a member. In terms of individuals, putting some time on their own to contribute to the projects being driven by the foundation, or at least to be an advocate of it. And also in terms of projects themselves, right? So things that the foundation likes to see forward. We're going to see something related to that later. And actually, this is a roadmap, right? So we've come a long way. It's been only a year, and some things are working pretty good. Some things are flaky and need some rethinking, but we're getting there, right? And everything started in May 2021, and you can see some of the most important milestones here. Couple of articles put together, some thought leadership being developed, the manifesto, quite necessary. And I'm gonna dwell on this later. The SCI framework or specification also was released, and it's currently on alpha, and we're gonna see what's up for. And towards March 2022, the first elections are being held, and yeah. The intention is that the steering committee is not, it's as representative as we can make it, right? In terms of voices. So this is my 4th event of this one, and it's taking place all over the world. And it's amazing how the community of people working in technology is passionate about this, and it's putting part of their time, their effort into being trained, into participating, and into being part of the event itself. Yeah, it's the first of its kind. We hope to, to make it as best as we can and to iterate and make it better next time. And as I said, the foundation itself is driving a lot of projects, and I would say one of the most promising ones is this one, is the software carbon intensity specification, and is an attempt to come to an agreement, to a standard on how to measure the carbon intensity of a software application or a software component, let's say. And it's currently in alpha. It needs some work, and this is a call out for the community to contribute. But basically, it's this formula-based approach in which, through a couple of input parameters, you can come up to a number that says, hey, your API is X grams of CO2 intense. Can we optimize? Can we make it better? And for that, you use the energy consumed in kilowatts hour of your application times the carbon emitted per kilowatts hour of energy. That's called the carbon intensity. of a network, of a grid, plus the carbon emitted through the hardware that the software is running on. And then per functional unit of your choice, right? It could be API requests, it could be machines, nodes, etc. So this is quite promising. It's been driven by the whole community. At the time that this was released, we already had out there liberated as open source a tool developed by Thoughtworks that is called the Cloud Carbon Footprint Monitoring Tool. And that is not using this exactly, it's using cost and usage data in the cloud to estimate the emissions. This is an attempt to, keep refining and evolving the way we think in terms of carbon intensity of software. And it's quite complex. Maybe people right now in the audience or in the Zoom call can see some, thoughts about some of these things, and we can discuss about that later. So most of this effort that we're trying to do as a tech community is kind of like a shift, right? It's kind of like a shift from this overall goal that has to do with reducing emissions that we usually take with offsets. It's a mechanism, or is a, it's something that we can do towards lower emissions, and it's good enough as we stand right now in the year that we stand for. But it's, as I said, it's kind of like a shift from here to here, right? So we're trying to eliminate or not to emit carbon unnecessarily. But talking about offsets, we can maybe show really quickly this. And Mako, should I click play here?
Yes.
Okay.
Please. Because you're sharing the screen.
No, I'm sharing the screen. There's no sound. No, yeah, I can explain because
It's another.
there's another one.
Yes, that's where you can explain.
Yeah, because there was no sound for the people in the Zoom call. Even for us, it was quite low.
Yeah.
I think I lost it. So if you remember that that visual aid that I had, let's try to, yeah, there we go. So yeah, our main focus, reducing emissions, right? And we're gonna concentrate on this as technologies, right? But we also wanna see if we can, drive forward some of that as well. And for that, the purpose of that video and this initiative driven by Thoughtworks, you wanna explain it? Or?
No, you can.
Okay. So as part of a partnership with Treedom, we have built a forest. Thank you. It's basically a way for us to contribute to offsetting some of the carbon being emitted by this event itself. So I would encourage you to go into this QR, and if you're lucky enough to get a spot, you will get the chance to plant a tree with your name. I believe that's correct, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you can see some of the data over there. The forest that we're planting for this is going to be about 60 trees, distributed among 3 different countries, higher areas. It's not monocultures, it's different types of trees. And yeah, you have an estimate there of how much CO2 that's going to be absorbing to try to offset the event and everything related to it. So here's the QR, check it out, go to the website, and yeah, put your name down. Did I forget anything?
No, I just want to add that the idea is that instead of giving any kind of merge or swap, that
usually get into that, like when you go to events, the idea was to give you something meaningful. So basically, if you scan this, you can make your own tree, like plant your own tree, and you can watch the journey of the tree since you planted it until it grows. And you can put it your name and choose what kind of plant you want to, what kind of tree you want to plant. And yes, and watch the journey. So basically, that's how we are doing it with Freedom. Help us. So please scan the QR and start to plant trees because that's how it works. Basically, we need to do that. So yes, hope you like the present.
Yeah, we thought it would be meaningful rather than having, you know, plastic notebooks or pens or something, right? So yeah, that's that. And kind of like as a segue to what's going to come next, let's start getting a little bit technical here and talk about what does it mean? What do we mean by green software, right? And this is kind of like a mind map that you can take with you. And what we're basically talking about is applications that emit less carbon, right? And you can start pulling from that thread and you get to talk about carbon efficiency and carbon awareness. Now, carbon efficiency relates to being more energy efficient. Let's say in the cloud, right? Are you using the right type of instances, for example, that consume less or more energy? Are you being more hardware efficient? That means using less hardware to do the same workload. And in terms of awareness, is basically changing the runtime behavior of the software, right? So you would run your software whenever or wherever it's more carbon friendly. So you have temporal carbon awareness and spatial carbon awareness. Temporal being running the workload at a time when more renewables are on the grid, and spatial running your workloads in a location with more renewables on the grid, right? I don't know, just to come up with a couple of examples, maybe you want to run your machine, you want to train your machine learning models in a region that is not necessarily your own because that region has more wind and solar energy, for example. It doesn't matter, you're just training the models, right? Whereas temporal awareness is like trying to run at capacity depending on how much carbon intense the network is, right? This relates to something that Monica is going to talk about next that has to do with demand shaping. And it's quite interesting because one of the questions being driven in the community, have you seen how Netflix degrades the performance, so the pixelates your movie when the bandwidth is not available, right? I think we've all seen that. So could companies afford as a business to downgrade a little bit their own services when renewables are not in the grid, for example? Because renewables they're not always on, right? So you have a time in the day in which the wind is not blowing, or you know, solar panel batteries are off, or whatever, right? And then anyway, coal and other non-green, say, methods are always operating at a minimum capacity, right? They're always fired up. So that's a food for thought, you know, when we go and take into our teams, it's something that that is being discussed here and there. And that's kind of like a short introduction. And I want to hand it over to you, Monica.
Thanks. So I'm going to just complement what Danny was saying. So to give you a bit more of like a view of the principle of green software. And yeah, well, first, when we talk about the principle of green software, we're talking about a core set of competencies that they were needed to define in order to build and run green sustainable applications. Oh,
I'm sorry. There we go.
Oh, yeah, great. So, and with this, we believe that with the 8 principles and 2 philosophies that we'll be discussing today, that a green software practitioner can actually make decisions which will have meaningful impact in the carbon emission of their applications. And then to start off with the principles, like first we're gonna talk about the carbon efficiency. And of course, we want to make sure that we build an application with the minimum amount of carbon emitted per unit of work. And we know that all software emits carbon, right? But then we want to make sure that we extract the maximum amount per gram of carbon emitted for running our applications. And this is why our ultimate goal is to reduce the carbon of the applications that emitted, that are responsible for emitted, right? How are we gonna do this? When we talk about carbon efficiency, we have to talk about energy efficiency. And obvious enough, this means that your application uses the less energy possible. And often we believe that electricity is clean, right? Because when you plug something in the wall, you don't get your hands dirty, there's no smell. But actually, the electricity that you're using is the single biggest emitter of carbon. And that is because we still consume electricity that is created through burning fossil fuels, and that will be mostly coal and actually gas and oil, natural gas and oil. So we can say that electricity is a proxy for carbon. And if our goal is to be carbon efficient, then our goal is to be energy efficient as well. And this brings us to carbon intensity, which Danny mentioned before, right? So to be carbon awareness is to know that the carbon intensity of the electricity is the measure of how much carbon emission per hour of kilowatt of energy you are consuming. And this means that if you're doing more with your application when the carbon intensity is low and doing less when the intensity is high, then this is called carbon aware computing. This means that when the carbon intensity is low, you're using more renewable sources, and when it's high, you're using like more carbon sources. And then with this, you help both reduce the emissions of your software carbon that emits, and it helps also to accelerate the energy transition from carbon sources to renewable energy. And we cannot talk about this without understanding what's the embodied carbon in every device that we use, right? So every device, when it's created and when it's destroyed, emits carbon. So since our goal is to be carbon efficient, our goal is to also be hardware efficient. And hardware is also a proxy for carbon. And there are two broad categories in this hardware efficiency. So the first one is the lifespan, the extending the lifespan of a device. So imagine every year there's a new iPhone coming out, and maybe there's a person that every year wants to get this new iPhone. The lifespan expected for a phone, a mobile device, is 2 years. But what if instead of like changing every year or every 2 years, you keep it for 4 years, which is perfectly working still? And the second one will be increasing the utilization of our hardware. So this is like if we have, for example, 5 servers and each of them have an embodied carbon of 1,000 kilograms, but they're running at 20% of utilization. What if instead we have that one server that has the same 1,000 kilogram only, and it's running at 100% utilization? And utilization is the key word here. So if we talk about the resources that are used for between the power consumed and the computer system, the rate which the useful work is done, that's called utilization. And actually, the utilization is the measure of how much your resources of the computer are being used, right? So because of this, the more you utilize your computer, and then you take advantage of how much you're converting the electricity to a useful computer that you're doing. So this is the same example that we talked before, right? So using the full utilization of your server instead of like distributing it to 5 of them. And this is just one device, right? But what about a network of devices, which of course we know it's a set of routers, servers, and all of this that we use to send data over the internet. So when you send data over the internet, you're sending the data through many devices. Each of those are consuming electricity, and each of those have embodied carbon. So as a result, any data you send, it's emitting carbon. So right now, that's why, like Danny was mentioning before, so we're trying to compensate, right? And then how can we help to this? So using the demand shaping that also we were mentioning before, right? So being aware of the demand, of shaping the demand when it's a high demand, then we supply the existing, like for the existing demand. And we do more with our application, but if the demand is low, then we do less. And actually, the demand shaping is related to another concept in sustainability, which is reduced consumption, which means that yes, we can do a lot to reduce consuming and to use better resources. But what if green software practitioner to be carbon efficient means that when the the carbon intensity is high, we just decide or consider to cancel it, right? And then we need to set these expectations with our end users, right? And reduce then our applications operations. And then finally, there is no highway to measure to optimization, right? It's a step by step, and we ask you to just take a look to end and see where is it best to put all the efforts for the optimization. And so bottom line, if you can architect an application that performs better with less resources, then overall you're reducing the carbon. And finally, we're gonna share with you the two philosophies that we were talking before. So the first one is that nothing happens in isolation. So small changes lead to big changes, right? So green software practitioner is inclusive. We don't care about the area or the role or the industry. Like every one of you can do something to have an impact on this. And also, we recognize there are many advantages to building sustainable applications. They're often more performance, they're always more cheap, but also our priority is practicing green software engineering for sustainability. Everything else is just an added benefit. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. I want to share really quickly the QR code again because some people is asking in the Zoom chat. There we go. I'm gonna leave that for a sec while we freestyle a little bit for a sec. And because after this, I want to circle back to the software carbon intensity framework, right? And maybe have a short informal discussion about how does it look like and what questions are popping up in the audience. I'm going to come back to this later, and if we have questions also in the chat, we can open the mic as well if people want to say something. So I'm going to take us back here, and I want to ask if off the top of their heads anyone has already something to say about this. Yes.
I have a question regarding the parameter called E.
Hi.
Because the E.
E, sorry.
Well, but talking about the I and the M,
Yeah.
those ones are relatively easy to get from the energy provider and the hardware provider. But where should I be looking for to get the consumption from my own app or when I am my own provider?
Yeah. First of all, which are the ones you think are easy to get? Let's start from that.
Which one?
Which ones are the ones you think are the easy ones to get? Let's start pulling from that thread.
Okay, I would think that the carbon emitted by the energy, I think we could get that information from that one, yes.
This one, right?
Yeah, from the
Okay.
energy provider.
Yeah, okay, so
And
before
Okay.
you continue, so this one is the carbon intensity of a grid, right? So it's how dirty your grid in Spain, let's say, actually is how many grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour it emits. Granted, it might be somewhat easy, but there are multiple sources of truth, right? And there is, you need to be sure who are you reading, right? So I like an app that is called Electricity Map that tells you like the intensity, at least in Europe, really well defined. And there's also an API that you can consume from them for exactly that. But then you have some other government institutions that also put out their own numbers, and they're not always the same. At least that's what I've seen.
Is this value dynamic also?
Yes, that's also, maybe Oriol wants to chip in into that, but
that
this
aggregates complexity.
this changes throughout the day or throughout the, based on the demand as well, right?
That was my question, is like, does it change over time, or is
Yeah.
it a fixed one?
No.
And what's the granularity of time?
Also
Because to
important.
understand your electricity bill is quite complex.
Yeah. Oriol?
And it's not that easy because the big producers like Google, like the US, Microsoft have their own sources of electricity production. So you cannot check only the grid, you need to check the grid and the production of the facility or the design.
Yeah. So if we keep pulling, we have E, right? Energy consumed by software in kilowatt hours. Any comments on that?
I think it's hard to calculate, right? There might be some approximation, some logic to, if you have several software your company running in a server or in a data center, there might be some logic to distribute how much your software consumes, but I don't know how dynamic that will be as well, right? Depending on the time of the day and pattern of usage of your software. I think it's also complex.
Yeah.
When I see the first time that I see the formula,
Yeah.
I thought that and in fact software doesn't consume energy. It's software that it's being run
On
because
hardware.
whatever that is.
Yes.
So
That makes it quite tricky, right? Because first of all, let's put a question out there and keep thinking about it. What happens with this when we think in the cloud, right? First of all, so you said if I have my server, right, and I can measure physically, right, something, but and this is me not knowing enough, perhaps, right? But can I get like an accurate measurement, from a VM?
You have to say what you're pointing at.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
The E.
I'm pointing out the E. Sorry about that. So can we get somewhat of an accurate measurement when when we're thinking in the boundary of, let's keep it simple, right? My own VM running on a server that is being shared by 1,000 other clients and 1,000 other VMs in a data center somewhere lost in Nevada. It adds a lot of layers to that. Whereas if I think of E or energy being consumed by my own, and I did the experiment, right, like my own Raspberry Pi, then that's quite different in terms of accessing the data, right? So that's a caveat. And then M. Any thoughts on M? That's the carbon emitted through the hardware that the software is running on. We can think about that as the embodied carbon, right?
I think that will be dynamic as well, but it depends how much pressure are you putting into the device. I mean, if the device is just idle, the footprint is going to be lower.
No, but you're not talking about the same thing there. So the embodied carbon of hardware, it's how much it took to produce.
The production instruction.
This
Yeah.
is about utilization,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
This number in M.
It's about the carbon emitted through the hardware that the software is running on. So it's embodied emissions, right? And if you break it down, because there is a way to break that down, M.
So maybe it's like how many devices, or like what is the structure you need to run your application? Like so each of those devices or each of those components have embodied carbon. So depending on how big is your structure? Also, that comes into play, right?
So I try to apply the formula to running a simple API on my Mac, for example, and that's a really nice thought exercise that people. I should be more of that.
No. It's I'm telling people online to drop their questions
Okay.
in the comment and we'll read them.
Cool. So I try to apply the formula to running a simple API on my own machine because it's what I can have accessible, right? And it's an interesting thought exercise because you arrive at a conclusion that it's been out there for a while now in terms of embodied carbon. You know, the energy consuming software by not exactly by software, right, but by the Mac, right? You can get somewhat of an estimate because you have that information available made by Apple, 80 something watts, maybe if it's idle, right, based on the supply from the charger. And then you do know the intensity of the grid for Spain somewhat accurately. You know, it's about 250, 300 grams per kilowatt hour, plus the embodied carbon, which is something that you can have, or you know, let's call it the M parameter, right? That you can guesstimate by the Apple environmental report as well, which is 400, depending on the Mac model, between 300 and 400 kilograms of CO2. That takes the whole life cycle of the Mac. So you can see, I mean, at least I can see a problem there, which is the proportion by which, you know, you emit carbon utilizing software/hardware versus how much it takes to produce the devices is ridiculous, right? So it will take you like a lot of time to account for the carbon that actually took to produce the device. And that's the kind of like thinking that this framework should trigger among us. Yes?
Does M also include data storage and this kind of stuff?
I don't think so. We can check then in the break, but I don't think so.
So these updates that they force you to upgrade your device, they are very harmful in that way.
Which thing that forces you?
Like this, when they update a software and they kind of force you to upgrade your device,
Right.
because
So
of performance. Right?
these are all the things that Monica talked about, right? And all the things that we as technologists can do, right? Because maybe when we design our product, you know, we think of our users and we say, yeah, I'm gonna make, you know, my new mobile game or my new mobile app to be only compatible with the latest iOS. And then you're, you know, leaving outside a whole bunch of devices out there from users that they already exist and they could be amortized in time in terms of how much carbon it took to produce those devices in the first place. So yeah, that's something that, you know, rarely comes to mind, but it's an important factor. So this is food for thought. The idea is that, again, a call out should be made so people can get involved, contribute, and you know, try to further refine this and see how we can evolve it. And for the first part of the summit, I think we're done. And now we are supposed to have a short coffee break until 11. And yeah, thank you and see you in a bit.
Yeah, because I clicked away.
All right, so we're gonna start back again. Can people in Zoom hear as well? Yes, amazing. All right, so next we're gonna go with a couple of speakers that are gonna talk mostly about the things that we've already introduced. And first we have Oriol. You wanna introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. I'm Muriel Toleria. I come from Oralud, a green tech from here, from Barcelona. And my objective is to share with you what we understand as a green tech, or share some examples of how we are applying the Green Support Foundation principles, and maybe something a little bit different. Well, I'm reusing some of the slides that Daniel and Monica shared with us, but I think that it's interesting to talk about the mission of the Green Support Foundation, that it's in fact to create the context, this awareness, to start working and creating green software, to have this in mind when we develop and we create software. But the point here is, what do we understand by green software? I'm sure that if I ask in the audience or in online audience, the first thing that will come to mind, I'm pretty sure, I'm using the green principle, so we will be agreed, are the carbon efficient, the electricity efficient, the hardware efficient. We could talk about cloud, we could talk about using specific languages, selecting the time to generate the cost of electricity, maybe about the network usage or other of the principles. How we are applying this kind of mindset, or how we are applying these principles to Oralud and the things we are doing. Let's talk about the how we are creating the software. And I think that this word, the how, this domain, the how, it's really important because we will talk about it a little bit later. Let me present Control Center. Control Center is a piece of software that we have been working on for the last couple of years. It was a long road. A control center is a hub that connects Red Eléctrica Española, the main controller of the electricity grid here in Spain, with the production plants, the nuclear ones, the photovoltaic, the hydraulic, all the plants, all the generation plants that we have here in the country. It has a crucial part on the electricity grid because it transmits information from one side to another, like start producing electricity in this plant because we need a peak of production, stop producing, and this kind of information. But it gives information to the production operators plan, the people that operates the plants that detects if something is not working as expected, if the peaks are not going where they want to go. So this is the ecosystem, but I don't want to enter more on the control center. I want to enter on how we approach the develop or the creation of this control center. The electricity grid in Spain and in whole Europe, and the States for sure too, have a very traditional approach because it's a critical system in the community, and all the requirements are very tough, are really hard, and are very specific. Like to create a control center, when you check the technical specifications, right now it's different, but 1 year and a half ago, when you check the technical requirement, they were talking about the specific hardware. Like you should install this kind of firewall, Cisco or Fortinet or something like that, with this kind of connector, using this kind of fiber, and we have an issue in there because Oralud is 100% cloud. We don't have data centers on our property. We don't have infrastructure by ourselves. We don't have enough knowledge to create a hardware efficient approach, neither the network one. So here we have two paths. The first one, the one we didn't follow, was to start working on our data center, becoming this kind of company, so on. But taking into account that we don't want to create even a worse impact on the carbon emissions, we said, well, let's start with Red Eléctrica Española. We were a little bit afraid because Red Eléctrica Española, it sounds bigger for us, and we agree on that we can start working on the underlying technologies, on the underlying requirements about high availability, communications, and so on. And we present this proposal of communications based on cloud. And after 1 year of discussions, agreement, we finally are a cloud control center certified. So we are providing this service to the production plants. We are providing this service to the operator plants and Red Eléctrica.
I think that the relevant point here is that we just not only help test ourselves, we have the new control centers or the already created control centers, they can move right now to cloud, reducing the embodied percent of carbon. So right now, following our approach, we already solved the issues that we have with the hardware and the networking. These are good news, but are bad news too. Let me share with you this precious slide. It represents the carbon emission of Holaluz. Maybe you can see a pink point in the corner. Well, this very small pink point, it represents the 0.013% of the total carbon emission of Holaluz, a company that is thinking a lot on the emissions. This represents the total emission that our cloud infrastructure is contributing. So we are calculating it with the carbon footprint that Daniel shared with us before, and it's amazing. The point here is that we can work really hard to reduce this 0.01%, but we will only reduce with software or on software this 0.01. So why are we talking now about this important? Well, I think that I should clarify that we have been working for several years to reduce this impact over years. So it's not free. It's not easy to achieve that. But the point is that taking into account the marginal benefits, we should start thinking about something different. Not only how we will build software, we should start thinking on other topics too. And here comes the purpose of my company, Holaluz, on working on why we will software, why we are creating this software. And the point is that the vision of Holaluz is to connect people to green energy. To connect people to green energy. Easy to say, a little bit harder to achieve. And we think that the only way we can achieve this objective is using technology and data. So that's why we think that our purpose is to achieve or to be a green tech. Well, let me share another example of the why. Not on the how we build software, on the why we build software. And I will take some minutes to talk to you about the rooftop revolution. The rooftop revolution is a project, initiative, business line of Holaluz that starts identifying more than 10 million rooftops here in Spain that could be transformed from rooftop to a small production plant. How we identify these rooftops? With technology, of course, and data, of course. Not only that, we identified those 10 million rooftops, and we are capable to identify the best shape of the solar panels, we identify the best number of solar panels, and we are capable to predict, with some Rostat, to predict the savings for our customers. So we can reduce the bill for them and so on. But not only that, we are capable to identify with technology and data, again, the neighbors that can use this electricity, this green generated electricity. And why is this relevant, this point is relevant? Because, as said, this is the total amount of carbon generated by Holaluz. We think that generating this carbon, that we are still working on reducing it, for sure, we can transform the electrical grid in Spain, at least, to create a greener electricity grid. How? If you have your rooftop with solar panels, you don't need to use the fossil origin of energy. If your neighbors can use your solar generated electricity, they didn't need to use the fossil ones. So the point is that we are creating software following the green software principles, or trying to. It's not a final way, it's a way to arrive at that. But we are really focused and we are really interested in the why we are creating software. I think that the part here in this talk, we have this sensibility, and we will start working for sure in the how. But I will be really happy if in a couple of years, in a couple of months, someone appears some side project, some initiative related with the why we will software. So thank you all. you have any question or whatever, we can put there. Okay.
One of the questions that, and without knowing much of this, one of the questions that I've seen being popped up is, what about the embodied emissions of the solar panels? Have you thought about that? Any comments on that?
Yeah, the point is that we calculate our carbon emissions in this ugly gray grid, and things we are doing, we are installing one of the best producers that assures that the solar panels will rest for at least 10 years, not reducing the productivity below the 80%, more or less, something like that. So we can assure that during 10 years you will not change the production plan. But I think that's the relevant point. We are generating carbon emissions to reduce carbon emissions. So we need to tackle it very, very, very hard, and we need to be very aware of this impact to not generate the opposite of what we're trying to do. Another question? Thank you all.
Thank you, Oriol. Any questions maybe in the Zoom chat that we've seen? Maybe, yeah, we can see them here anyway.
Yeah, I didn't see any.
Yeah, I think it's fine by now. All right. Thank you, Oriol, for that amazing talk. And next we have Juan and Elena that are going to talk us through something equally as interesting. I'll just technology. There we go. No, not sure.
We could.
So the floor is yours, and maybe you want to introduce yourselves first?
Sure. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Hello people on the other side of the screen. Today we are talking about sustainability meeting topologies. My name is Juan Fernando, infrastructure consultant here in Thoughtworks, and with Elena Gomez, software developer, we're going to talk about this topic. But first, we're going to introduce a few concepts like what sustainability is in the first place, right?
Okay, we are going to start with a simple definition about the sustainability. Is avoidance of depletion of natural resource in order to maintain an ecological balance. The idea with this is to do things more an environmentally friendly way. Yeah, we are going to continue explain how is sustainability is important. If you see, the people is releasing the sustainability is something have too much power, and have the real future is important because it's offer a benefit for us, and the other thing is present in our lives. And the sustainability is a real challenge because it depends on the context. You always need to change the idea how to improve the things. And for that reason, there are some providers like Amazon, Google, Microsoft. They are creating some tools and they are creating some guides help us to reduce the carbon impact inside our companies, inclusive when we use the cloud computing. And these good tools help us to reduce the cost and try to approach the green optimization computing. And right now we are going to continue to explain what is the team topologies.
Hey, the other part of this is team topologies. Before jumping in how this is related to sustainability, let me say what team topologies actually is. From the book, we could say that team topologies focuses on how to set up dynamic team structures and interaction modes that can help teams adapt quickly to new conditions and achieve fast and safe delivery software. In other words, that means we are trying to get teams more autonomous, to be more independent, and also achieving an increase in our delivery performance. that is actually super important. But again, we said team topologies. What is the topologies that we are talking about? Is these things here. These topologies actually have 4 kinds of topologies, but we are going to talk about 3 of them for now. The stream-aligned teams, the platform teams, and finally the enabling teams. Let me say about the first one, the stream-aligned teams is the most present in the organizations. Usually above 70% of the teams inside an organization should be stream-aligned teams, aligned with the business domain. And for that reason, they are close to the customers, they are prone to make architectural decisions, and because of that, they are usually more aware of the context and trade-off that the application or software or service actually has. But they are not the only one. Then we have the platform teams. The platform teams are quite the opposite. They don't have customer context, or they don't have enough customer context, but they have a cross-organizational visibility, which actually is another strength. And their goal is to make, to reduce the cognitive load in streamlined teams and increase their delivery performance as well. And finally, set up them for governance. That's important. Remember, we were talking about having teams independent. And finally, we have the enabling teams. These teams usually could be a little bit ephemeral. We are not going to have enabling teams forever because they are there to close the gaps and facilitate. One traditional example could be DevOps enabling teams, where the goal is to reduce the gap between developers and operation teams. And now we can talk about how each of them relates with sustainability.
Okay, we are going to start with the first team, the stream align. Like Juan said, is important because normally the teams work close to the customers and can specify well what is the necessity of the customer and how we going to reduce the impact, the carbon impact. Here, the most important thing is the carbon efficiency in a cross-functional requirement. Is the first objective have this thing. And it's why, because we can analyze the maintainability, the scalability, and the carbon efficiency, and inclusive sustainability. And the other is when the client have the context, it's easier to see the trade-off or the benefit. Probably we can apply inside the company, yeah, or for the client, exactly. And we can analyze the traffic, and we can see the indirect impact, yeah. And the other thing is, for example, the live web interfaces. For me, this is the most important because normally when you have an application, you build this application for consume resources, yeah, and get the petitions. And normally we have too much hardware resources, yeah, and this is very painful and consumes too much carbon. And for that reason, we can do analysis for trying to reduce this impact. Now we are going to continue with the platform teams.
Yeah. The second topology that we are going to talk about is platform teams. Next one, please. Okay. Due to the nature of the platform teams, they have great opportunities for improve our carbon thinking. For example, they can improve all the systems at the same time. And an easy example of that is, for example, choosing a more sustainable instance or changing a CPU architecture. And if platform teams do that, immediately all of the developers consuming that platform are going to receive the benefits just for free, with no effort. Developer doesn't need to do anything about it. It's just on the platform. And because of that, the platform team can create service templates with green principles in mind. That's useful for organizations running, I don't know, developer portals or service catalogs. When they come to the need to create a new service, that service is going to be spawned with more environmental friendly instances, CPU, networking, and even the region when the service is actually running. But it's not that, all of that. The final thing is to provide observability capabilities, because we need to know what's going on. I mean, we are trying to save carbon and decrease the carbon footprint, but we don't know how much. And we need to provide metrics just like regular metrics, I don't know, CPU, networking, financial metrics, even business metrics, and now we are trying to provide sustainability metrics as well, trying to let our developers, engineers, and non-engineers to know what's going on, honestly. Bonus track, I have something else. Next slide, please. This is the shared sustainability model from AWS, quite similar to the shared responsibility model. Basically, it says that AWS is responsible for sustainability of the cloud, and the customer is responsible for sustainability in the cloud. But I want to mention this because this can apply to platform teams as well. For example, in this way. Next one, please. We could say platform team here is responsible for the sustainability of the platform, while the developer, our customer, is responsible for sustainability in the platform. And the same concepts apply with small difference. For example, the platform is not going to decide the materials of the building, on the energy being used, but we can right size our resources, make sure our utilization and reutilization is getting better, and even have cost accountability as well. And the next team is the enable team that we are going to talk about.
I think the function for this team is the most important because it's the people in charge to evangelize about the carbon practice. Yeah, and this group helps to create the green ops, and the green ops is in charge to show the importance the cloud sustainability. In this case, it's important to collaborate with the find of teams because it's important, sorry to say, evaluate the cost and evaluate to the impact it's going to have this practice inside the companies. And the other thing is see the metrics. The golden metrics is obviously in the green ops and the fine ops, because it's important to see the transfers and measure the transfers and the cost. The customs are using this kind of practices. You want to add something here?
Just a small thing about, for example, golden metric. What actually is helpful if, for example, let's imagine you are in a boat and you're trying to test the wind, and you don't know exactly where your boat is going, but depending on the wind, you know if you are going into the right or wrong direction, straight forward, backward. Golden metric is kind of for that. I mean, it's not a metric that allows us to know everything about the organization, but with the golden metric, we can say, okay, we are spending this amount of money per customer, or we are emitting this amount of carbon per customer. So that metric itself is not going to solve our lives, but it's pointing out if we need to increase our efforts to decrease the carbon footprint, or if we are just good. That's the whole point of the golden metric. And maybe it's not, it doesn't look so important at the beginning, but trust me, within time, it's gonna be.
Okay, we are going to find the talk with some words.
Yeah, I would like to share this quote from our friends here, Daniel Frate and Chris Ford. Many software engineers are deeply concerned about the climate crisis and how their work impacts it. They don't need to be told that there is a problem, of course, but they do need to be given clarity as to how they can exercise their professional judgment to make a positive difference. And I think that's important. I mean, we all are aware of what's going on, and we know that we need to do something, but we are here because we don't know how. And this is the collaborative effort that we are having between all and the GSF, trying to know how. Again, thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, please do talk to us.
Any questions?
Have you seen some progress in your career in the cloud provider? I mean, very interesting. On how the big hyperscalers are approaching this in terms of enabling customers with more data or being more efficient in terms of cooling system. Can you touch upon a little bit of that?
Yeah. I have seen a couple of examples. I can say for the last year, the big three providers, AWS, GCP, and Azure, are doing great efforts to try to make their services more sustainable, creating data centers under the sea even, or even data centers fully powered by wind energy. A couple of years ago, that was super expensive, as you can imagine. Me as a user, platform developer, or whatever, I didn't want to check that solution because it's super expensive. My client is not going to pick up. But now we're talking, the difference is so small, and in some cases, it's even cheaper to be sustainable. And we have a lot of tools. Talking about metrics, all of the providers are creating some tools like the CCF dashboard to make everybody to know how much carbon are you emitting per region. Again, that's a dynamic value, and it can fail sometimes, but at least it's like, as I said before, it's like our win. It's the way that we can realize if we are going into a good or bad direction. I don't know if that answers the question. Anybody else? Cool. Again, thank you.
Maybe in the, I don't know if the audience online has some questions. I see some comments. Well done. Well done. Okay. All right. So I think next we have our special guest, Mark, from the UK. And he's gonna talk about something, again, equally as interesting, if technology allows. There. Yeah, and let me put this in first.
I'm using the old-fashioned map. You should have bottom.
Where is it?
So you can't see it because it's going through I know your figure.
I think you have it below and below.
Ah.
It's because of that? No, it's here.
Oh yeah.
There we go.
Cool present.
Yay.
Imaginative. Hi. So I'm Mark Butcher from a small consultancy company in the UK called Positive, and we focus very heavily on FinOps primarily, but in the last year, 18 months, it's morphed very quickly into the world of GreenOps. Mainly because of my personal life, I'm very focused on sustainability, and it aligns so well with the world of FinOps. So my aims for this, it's really to give you a really brief overview of kind of the world of developing world of GreenOps, why it works, where it fits. It's hopefully to articulate where there's a really gigantic overlap between GreenOps and FinOps, and to show where the intersect is, and equally where it isn't as well. And I'm also here from the perspective of the FinOps Foundation. So I'm running the working group for sustainability in the FinOps Foundation, along with a great team of colleagues. And we're working on developing a whole bunch of standard practices that you'll see later on to help FinOps professionals deliver sustainable cloud services. I'm really kind of pleased that I came after the other two presentations, because what I'm going through very much kind of dovetails exactly in with what you've sort of already heard. What's really good is to see that development teams really care about sustainability, to see that developers care, to see that the end users care. There's also a really big question of why suddenly do companies care? Because companies intrinsically are motivated by money. If you talk to the average CEO, say 2-3 years ago, I would say 90% of them, the sustainability was greenwash. It was paying lip service to it, didn't really care too much still. But suddenly what they've got is they've got pressure coming from every single angle. Whichever way they look, there's pressure hitting them, and that's impacting their bottom line. Firstly, they've got investors and shareholders agitating, saying, no, we want you to be more green, we want you to be more sustainable. You've even got some of the most nefarious investment VC companies like BlackRock coming out and saying that sustainable companies make them more money. And that's where they're going to be focusing their investment, because it makes them more money. And that means that CEOs are getting now pressure to go, right, why aren't you green? The investors, you've got to be green because we've got to get there, because we need to make more money, more of a return. Then you've got governments introducing more and more legislation, and external parties, legislation, governance, rules. So people have to start measuring more and more, and they have to be more accurate. They can't carry on with what they were doing, which was effectively
making it up, putting it in a brochure and considering it done. Then there's also, since COVID, there's been a term in the US which was the Great Resignation. Now suddenly there is a real shortage of skills and there are more jobs than there are people to fill the jobs. So employees, and particularly the next generation who have come through, are choosing their next employers based upon their ethical beliefs. And so suddenly it's no longer good enough for them to be working for companies that don't care about the environment, that don't care about the social side of things. So employers who don't take a sustainable route are suddenly finding they've got a much smaller talent pool to choose from, because the really skilled people, the really skilled developers who care, will not work for them. They just can't get them on board. And then the bit that really affects the revenue is customers who are making their buying decisions based upon the brands they choose they want to work with. So they've got brands where they say, do I want to buy from a brand who is unsustainable and unethical, or do I want to buy from one who is ethical? And you can see that in the way that a lot of these brands have been growing and changing, because it's no longer an option for them. So what this is doing is it's causing the top-down principle, where suddenly I'm seeing CEOs, I've talked to a lot of CEOs who are now being bonused and paid on reaching their net zero targets. And there's nothing that influences budgets in an organization better than a CEO being paid in a certain way. Because they go from saying, we don't care about it, just get on with it. I'll give you a team of one, get me a brochure and do that, to a CEO saying, I'm not going to get 10 million euros this year because I haven't hit our net zero target or we're falling behind. And I've got to go and stand in front of the investors and be shouted at because the share price has gone down by 5%. This is brilliant. So it's great that we've got this bottom up, but we've now got the top down. So people are now being forced to do it. And you saw a better version of this a second ago. This is my very ugly version of the same picture. People always talk about, isn't the cloud already sustainable? Yeah. So I don't have to do anything because I've outsourced it. The cloud's sustainable. Amazon have told me they're wonderful. Microsoft say the same thing. Google say the same thing. That's kind of true. You go to some of, say, Amazon's older data centers in the US, and they are ugly, horrible, nasty things. They might be using sort of more renewable energy, and they have made more commitments, and they are investing a lot of their billions of profits into being more sustainable. But the problem with that is that it's not all there yet. And yes, one of the reasons why the cloud providers are being sustainable is because actually you can swap out sustainable for being massively efficient. And then you can, if you say massively efficient, effectively what they're saying is their bottom line profits are dependent upon them offering the most efficient services they can. So they want to use the least energy they possibly can. They want to use the most efficient service and infrastructure they can, because that suits their bottom line. But they are also pushing ahead with being more, the data centers under the sea. Which ironically, actually, from talking to a lot of environmentalists, they're not actually that keen on data centers under the sea, because actually what you're doing is you are literally boiling the ocean. It's not the best thing in the world. But in the world of FinOps, everyone always forgets the sustainability in the cloud. So their responsibility of the cloud, as professionals and developers and people running platforms, we're responsible for in the cloud. And there is so much waste in cloud services. So I've been doing FinOps now for 4 or 5 years in total. And I can say my average waste that I see in every organization is around 43%, give or take a little bit. An organization could have about 30%, but it's unusual. I very rarely see anyone with less than that, and I have seen some with as high as 80% waste, which is just absolutely criminal, because if you think about it, that's not just billions of dollars being flushed down the world. It's all the excess power being consumed, it's the embedded carbon in the infrastructure, it's a huge amount of waste. So cloud services, to an extent, yes, they're sustainable, but no, the way we're running them and delivering them is absolutely not. It's something that we need to look at fixing. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room understands the difference between scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, I guess. But if you don't, scope 1 and 2, effectively it boils down to, this is from a cloud provider perspective, it's the power and cooling, essentially, not much more than that. Scope 3 is the bit that they have been ignoring for so long. And that is the embedded carbon in the wider supply chain. It's all the products and services they buy, it's everything they take to run the physical assets, the raw material extraction. And that's the bit that actually has been completely ignored in almost all the reporting. And why is this a problem? So from a cloud provider perspective, their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions are your scope 3 emissions as a consumer of cloud services. And if they're broadly ignoring their scope 3 emissions, which they have been doing, effectively what you're saying is when you're getting the figures and you're reporting on them, you're ignoring a huge proportion of your overall emissions from the cloud services. And the reason why that matters is that. So Scope 3 emissions are an absolutely vast amount of a cloud provider's overall emissions. There's a good study, I've got a good white paper from Microsoft. In fact, I'm talking with Microsoft in 22 minutes about this, which is they've done an analysis and they found that 77% of their total emissions are Scope 3. So what that means is actually they call their Scope 1 and 2, and in the white paper they've written, inconsequential. So the fact that they're focusing all this love and attention on power and calling this, that's that part of it. It's the cream on top of the pint of Guinness heads. Scope 3 is a bit where they need to be focusing, and that's a bit that is in the embedded infrastructure. It's the servers, the storage, the networks, it's the transit, it's everything that comes into that. But the problem is, hyperscalers haven't been tracking it, and the visibility they've been giving us, still to this day, is absolutely woeful. And if anyone can explain to me how these cloud providers who make billions of dollars a year of profit and are the biggest experts in the world at analysing data, why they haven't been able to do a better job of actually reporting and visualising this, it just doesn't make sense whatsoever. So that means from a consumer perspective, reporting on waste has been nearly impossible. So where does FinOps fit? As I said, cloud emissions are mostly unknown and untracked. And cloud waste that I talked about effectively does mean higher carbon emissions in almost all cases. And FinOps as a practice is absolutely 100% the key to unlocking the carbon savings. And the nice thing is, FinOps savings equals financial savings as well, obviously. And financial savings means that you can often use those savings to fund other sustainability initiatives inside companies. So I'm working with some very big brands at the moment who are justifying huge sustainability projects completely off the back of the fact they're saving millions of dollars on their cloud spend. They're repurposing that spend into other more positive projects, as well as improving their bottom line. And the bit that I think you heard, which was the developers who care about sustainability, means actually it gives you another reason as a FinOps professional to justify change. Because the hardest thing with FinOps is not hard to find waste at all. You can find waste wherever you look, but it's sure as hell hard convincing development teams and operations teams to change their minds and change what they do. I've sat in front of so many of them over the years where you say, your instances are oversized, and they go, you just don't understand, it's too complicated for you, you're just a platform person, you don't get software. And it's true, to some extent that's very true. But if you tell them from a sustainability perspective, because they generally don't care about the dollars are irrelevant to them, it's not their problem. But if you give them another metric to care about, then it's easy to influence change and help drive the change. So GreenOps cloud waste. You find it in all the areas of cloud services. It's everything from the compute, the storage, the connectivity. It's some of the new generation services that we're building out, serverless microservices, that side of things. But it's important to say, where is that? And that comes in from things like organizations, particularly the older ones, hyper-conservative on the way they build services and size things. They always massively over-provision things. They oversize all their instances. They build them too large. They don't turn them off when they can turn them off. They're running development environments 24/7 that could be switched off out of hours. All the others, they've got zombie instances running, orphaned instances, just waste piling upon waste. And that spirals into having things like they don't have to find application standards for sustainability. They might have them for performance, they might have them for security, they might have them for accessibility, but they don't have anything from a sustainability and efficiency perspective. And that same thing applies into operational processes. So I was with a bank a few weeks ago who they've been running in the cloud, and they were very proud they've been running in the cloud for the last couple of years. Until I mentioned they've never looked backwards. So that the services they deployed on the first day were still running on exactly the same instance types that they'd always had. They'd never bothered saying, are these the right instance types? And their average utilization from a performance perspective was 3.2%. It's just ridiculous. And there were instances they could have chosen that were the new Graviton-based instances that were about 80% more power efficient. So you think of the impact of that in terms of the savings they could have made. And it also goes into strategy as well. So do you have a defined digital services sustainability strategy that is aligned not just inside the cloud, but across your entire ecosystem? So everything from even going as far as the line of business requirements. So think about how when an application or service comes into fruition where someone says, I want to do a thing. Are they considering sustainability as part of doing that thing? So I had another example with a telco provider. It was their online retail side of things. And so they were streaming multimedia content to all their users, huge volumes of it. They were sending out in Ultra HD type formats. They were sending out with full audio encoding all the time because their marketing department said, that's what we do. We're always going to do that because that's how our users, they want the information. And we did something very stupid. We asked them to actually go and have a look at what the users were doing with that information and how it was being interpreted. So they found that over 90% of the people receiving the information were looking at it on a mobile device, which doesn't even get high definition images in the first place. They found that 93% of those users, by default, always had the audio switched off. Because who has the audio switched on streaming on the content's going out, and the Facebook ads and all these other ads? So we changed their thinking. This is the cultural side of things with the change you need to be having. Is we said, well, why don't you just have a toggle switch? Why don't you be sustainable by design and have a toggle switch that influences the user changes where they can choose to toggle it for Ultra HD and have full audio? And what happened was by having that implementation, they effectively managed to reduce the size of the data, the transit, the compute requirements, everything spiraling down by in excess of 95% of the total platform design. And not a single user, not a single customer, not a single user complained. No one even noticed, and no one toggled that switch to go into Ultra HD mode ever. And the saving on that, if you put the saving into context, 1.5 million euros a year. That's a hell of a lot of sustainability projects. So the intersect, I think it's pretty obvious, isn't it? If you're doing the FinOps job properly and you're making things really, really efficient and you're running things as best they can be, you will be delivering green ops effectively. You will have sustainable services as long as you're adding in the extra layer. Because where the intersect doesn't quite happen, there are some areas of FinOps which are actually anti-green ops. And when I say anti-green ops, it's things like people who make giant commitments to savings plans and reserved instances. Culturally, from a sustainability perspective, that is an absolute nightmare. Because culturally in an organisation, if I take the UK public sector, it's probably a very good example. If you tell them they've got X amount of money that they've committed to in spending, they will spend exactly that amount of money. They will not care about saving anything, so they won't bother about developing sustainable services in that context because they see a pot of money they have to spend. If they don't spend it, it goes next year. They won't get it next year. So culturally, that's a bad thing from a green ops perspective. But generally, it's pretty well aligned. So all the usual FinOps practices, if you're right-sizing things, if you're optimizing things, if you're switching off all from instances, if you're doing all that, then you're in a pretty good place. But there's a measurement challenge. There's no nice way of saying it. The cloud vendors have done a pretty crappy job. I'm not very impressed by what they've done. They're getting there. They're starting to do more, but they're not moving fast enough. Some of them are moving faster than others. There's a real lack of kind of granularity in the way that you can look at the data. Because what's also happening is, I'm now seeing is software development teams are actually asking that I want the unit economics of my software. I want to know what is the carbon footprint per unit of transaction for my individual software platform across my entire ecosystem. And that's just not possible right now to do it with any level of accuracy. And not all vendors are including all emissions. This is also a big one. So how can you compare Amazon to Azure to Google if they're all basing on different metrics, different calculation models, and excluding vast parts of their metrics? And it's really hard to roll up the data in an intelligent way. And the other thing is most of the big tooling vendors in the market haven't yet jumped on board with this. And there are so many FinOps tooling vendors in the world, and none of the big boys have even, whether it's Cloud Health, Cloud Checker, Spot, whichever one you want to name, Apptio, none of them have really jumped on board and included sustainability data yet because they're finding it too hard to get the information out of the hyperscalers in a consistent manner where they can guarantee the accuracy of the metrics. So this is what I mean by the difference in the gap here. So if you look at this, just look at the emission scope there. So you've got AWS, Azure, and Google. So Azure are the only ones to include scope 3 emissions. And if we're doing it on the basis that scope 3 is 77 to 80% of the total emissions, how on earth could you, as a giant consumer and cloud services, compare which one's better if one's telling you that we're 10 tons of CO2 a year and the other one says they're 90, and they're both correct, just because one's excluded all their scope 3. And then you've got things like the carbon data range. So the carbon intensity metrics they use for calculating their scope 1 and 2. The AWS figures are 3 months old. So you can't make a conscious, accurate, timely decision. You can't make a real-time decision on where you're going to put workloads. Because I hear people a lot of times saying, I want to put my workloads in the area of the lowest possible carbon intensity. Awesome. You do that with AWS, and you could be, you could be in the summer basing it on the spring figures. And then you've got the calculation period. So for AWS, it's monthly. For Azure, it's hourly, but it's still based on monthly data. And then for Google, in the flip of that, their carbon data is hourly. They get it from the electricity map, but they're rolling it up monthly. So by the time you get it, it might have been accurate, but it's no longer accurate. Then there's a blend of services. So Amazon, they let you break it down by EC2, S3, and other. And how big is other? Amazon has thousands of services. Azure let you claim to include everything. That's part of my call with them in 12 minutes. Is to actually go through and help understand what is the actual truth of the matter. And Google's limited to around about 80 to 85 services right now. And then geographic breakdown as well. So what you can see here is that it's completely inconsistent. So also, from an Amazon perspective, you can't choose which region might be better. You can only look at which country might be. And because they're all based in this averages as well, the other problem this gives you is, if you get the carbon data out and you're trying to attribute it to, I want to pick a more carbon-friendly instance based upon the data consumption, you can't, because they're averaging it out for the entire region and applying that average based upon the proportion of services that you're consuming. So it's just an average proxy figure. So where do you start if you actually want to fix it? This is very, very busy, but this boils down to the first thing that I would really recommend is get some metrics, use a tool like CCF to actually get something which is consistent, at least across the hyperscalers, understand those metrics. But the key thing you have to be doing is actually building that stakeholder kind of environment, building that culture out across the entire parts of the organization. So you're all talking using common terminology, common themes with a common goal. And you also have things like defined KPIs and defined targets. It's not enough to be doing it just from the back end, from a FinOps perspective, because you're never going to change the culture. Because if you do it just from a FinOps perspective, you're always fighting that battle. You're always going to have oversized instances, things never being switched off. But if you can embed it culturally as a standard within the entire organization, so you have a sustainability development standard, a sustainability operational standard, you have sustainability being considered in the line of business requirements. So at least you've got a fighting chance of things being vaguely sustainable when they creep through. And also when you then talk to people about it, they'll understand what you're talking about and why. So from a foundation perspective, what we're doing is, as a group, we're trying to create this standardized content for everyone that can be used by FinOps practitioners everywhere. Trying to create it in a way so we can share it so that everyone understands this is how you do it, how you adopt it. So an overall standardized sustainability framework for cloud services. We're looking at running kind of education and training. Actually, interestingly, we're also seeing big organizations giving sustainability budgets for training for IT staff now. So it's actually funding internal training, which is quite an interesting one. We're looking at building out a maturity assessment, because how you approach it and at what speed you go depends upon the maturity of the organization and where they are as an organization in the context of sustainability, not just where the IT department is. We're looking at building standardized KPIs and targets and standardized remediation lists. We've already got that standardized remediations now. We've built out an entire list of the easy things you can focus and when you need to focus on them. And we want to be using the community, because the FinOps Foundation has got, 5,500, 6,000 organizations as members now. And we want to be using the voice of that community to beat the living hell out of the cloud providers to be better. Because at the moment, they're not doing it fast enough. They're focusing more on what makes them money, which is selling the dream of how you build sustainable services on their platforms, conveniently ignoring what's behind them, which is all the carbon. And just a broader content library and bringing the communities together as well, because what we're seeing is the community around sustainability is generally individuals within organizations or small teams within organizations who are all struggling with the same thing. And we're trying to stop reinventing the wheel, which is why we're looking at working with the Green Software Foundation and why we're trying to work with some of the vendors to at least do things in a more consistent way. And that was me.
Thank you, Mark. I don't know if there are any questions. Guys?
Yeah, sorry. Talking about the intersection between FinOps and FinOps, have you ever seen outside the public sector example another situation like that? Like, I don't know, in a technology company when you need to kind of choose between be more sustainable or be cheaper, for example, or vice versa, could be.
Yeah, so there are only a few areas where it's more expensive to be green. And the ones where you're doing that are typically where you'd be looking at something like saying, like, which region are we going to deploy it? Because if you, for example, deployed in AWS Sweden versus North Virginia, it's way more expensive in Sweden than it is in North Virginia. And that's where it's a harder balance. And that's where you need to have the metrics to be able to showcase. And that's where it comes down to the cultural side of it, where your organization has to care more. And that's where the hardest bit of that work is communicating within the business the impact of their decisions. Because organizations who have net zero targets, if they start seeing they're not going to be reaching them, that is actually nowadays taking a higher priority than saving money. Because a lot of big organizations actually don't care that much about saving money. And I've had that. So I still remember one of my most embarrassing moments as a FinOps professional. I went into a big US bank because I found 30 million euros worth of savings. I said, fantastic, got the savings, this is how you do it. And the CTO looked at me and said, that's just a rounding error. Yeah, and what he meant by that was their overall IT budget was 5 billion euros a year. So to save 30 million, it's like for him, it was like, well, I could just switch something off over there to do that. That's not interesting enough. So actually, no, it's almost all organisations. If you get to the right people and they have a net zero target and a net zero plan, they don't want to be doing things where they're going against that. So quite often, actually, the financial balance is to be more in favour of doing that.
Another off-topic question, sorry. Do you think in the future, is there any chance for the FinOps teams or GreenOps teams, I don't know, to merge into a new kind of teams? Because within time, they are quite similar and more. Is there personal opinion, do you think that probably they are going to merge in the future?
No, so what I actually see happening is FinOps teams taking a stronger lead in an overarching GreenOps culture. Because if you think about it, to make it work successfully, it isn't actually one individual area of the business who's owning this thing. It has to be owned across the spectrum. So you almost need that stakeholder group of contributors from development, from operations, from the line of business. So actually everyone's understanding where you're going and what you're doing. If you try and do it in isolation with a team leading it, you'll probably have less success. But the FinOps bit is actually the key to actually making it all work at the end of the day, because you're the ones who can spot the trends, can spot the usage patterns, can report on things. But it's getting the longer term impact, which is changing the standards, the policies and the approaches, generally has to happen outside of the FinOps function.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, I think our last speaker is already here, and we're gonna kick it off with him. All right. Make sure you introduce yourself.
Okay, hello everyone. I want to start with one question. Who here would throw away their car after a window broke? Okay, no one. That's the answer I was looking for. So today we're going to talk about that. So my name is James Warren. I'm a senior PA here at Thoughtworks, and on my free time, I have learned to fix hardware. So today, on this talk, I wanted to show you my story about how I ended up on the repair movement and how this has an impact on sustainability. By the end of this talk, I hope I can increase your awareness on how your decisions as developers and as users have an impact on sustainability. So where did all this started? So this started with just one question. Can we fix Biden Apple? So 10 years ago, a friend of mine came to me and told me like he was going to throw away his iPhone 5S because the display was broken and the battery has some durability issues. to me, that was shocking because after an investment, such as an investment in that time, throwing away that phone was something like I wouldn't expect. So after that encounter, I went to my home and dived in the beautiful internet. And some light came to my with an amazing community called the Reaper community. I don't know if you know about it, but they are everywhere in the internet. So from YouTube to blogs to Reddit, they have many users there. And they showed me something that I wasn't aware of, that you can fix stuff. And it's really easy to do. So after that, I started my path as what I now call my surgeon hardware hobby. So I'd like to share like some of the findings after 10 years I did. So from the user perspective, these are the 3 most common fixes I've been doing, but they are also the three most common fixes that people don't know they can do by themselves. So replacing a hard drive with a SSD is something really easy to do. And also, it not just increases your lifespan from the laptop to 3 to 5 years, but also the performance. So when we are complaining about how slow is our computer, that is one of the most easiest fixes we can do. And the next two, the display and the battery replacement, I think everyone here has a display that has been broken, or we all have this kind of fear that our battery will drain out. So those two are also really easy to do. But companies and also users that are not willing to invest a little bit of time into finding out about that don't get into it. So these two are really easy, and 90% of the time you can do it in less than an hour. So that is something cool. Other things I found out is from the company side is like there's this trending now for the last I would say like 3 to 5 years to companies to start pairing software with hardware. And what that means is like such thing as a display replacement cannot be done, or if it can be done, most of the features that display has are not available for the user. So that for my side, and it's been like I'm a little bit worried that if we follow that path, users will be discouraged to fix stuff. The other thing I've been come across is the soldering part. So companies are starting to soldering such things as the RAM. So if you need to upgrade your laptop, it's not possible now because, well, it's possible if you know how to solder, but the prone error process for doing that is really high. So users don't want to do that because soldering requires not just the tools, but also knowing the skills. So, and there's another thing they do is like the glue stuff. They put glue everywhere. And you say, oh, glue is easy to well, not that easy because if you put glue under a battery, when you're trying to take away, most of the time they fold. And a battery fold, I don't know if you have seen one of those, but not a good experience for someone. But it's not everything is bad. So some companies as Microsoft, they're trying to change their designs. And in which way? So in the way that we can do plug and play. So you can swap an SSD that you need more capacity, just take it away and put a new one. Also with RAM, they are doing a plug and play, and with one of the things we all are more aware of is the batteries. So batteries that we all know that if after any 18 years, they drain really fast. So now they are trying just to plug and play. You take away the display, you take away the battery, you put away a new battery, put it in the new battery, and put the display, and that's it. And that is just 10 minutes repair. But it's not also. I like to share some of the success stories. So one of the things I'm most interested is the scuba icons. So what is scuba icons? As you can guess, is icons. I don't know why they like water. I don't know. Even though they don't go well, but they like to go into the water. So one of the stories I had, like the one I'm most proud of, my best friend 2 years ago went to a trip in the sea, and her iPhone went into the sea. So that is a big no for everyone, right? So she came back to me and told me like, oh, the port authorities have given my iPhone back, but it's dead. So I told her like, okay, let's try it. Let's try to at least see what's inside and what we can save. Maybe we can save the data. So after 4 days, we were able to not just recover the data, but also to make the iPhone usable again. So it was just about changing the display, changing the battery, and fixing all the seawater that was around the logic port. So you do that with alcohol, and there you go. 2 years later, she's still using her iPhone. So as you can see, it's not that hard to put some examples, to put some effort there. What else? Preparing this presentation, I have a spreadsheet with all the fixes I've been doing, and this is not to put a pin on me, but it's just to share with you that if everyone would do a little repair on their devices, the impact will be amazing. In the last 5 years, I did 200, more than 200. But imagine if every single one of us used our phones or our laptops, how impactful that would be to the planet. And also the third one is when you do a repair for someone, they somehow get really excited about it. I don't know why, but I think maybe it's because they have some attachment to the laptop or to the phone. But then when they go to their families, to their friends, and to their companies, they do this thing like talk about it. So they, without trying, they are spreading the word about you can fix stuff, and you are able to do it not in an expensive way, not in a hard way, just in an easy way. So that is something. And so two key takeaways, I would like to talk about the user side. I think users should be more aware of the decisions they make when they purchase electronic devices. And also, when we are purchasing hardware, we should be also more critical with ourselves and with the companies they sell us. Because most of the time they tell us like, this is no way to repair this, so the only way is to buy a new one. Most of the time that is not the case. And so we should be more critical and more skeptical when they tell us no, because most of the time it's just one click away the solution. If you go to the internet, to Google, everyone has the same problem. So you can see like, oh, this is an easy fix, or you should just change this flex cable, or this is about an update. So most of the time it's just one click away. And from the company side, I think companies should start doing a better design and having repair on the default design, because most of the time that is not the case. And if we change that, as some of the companies are doing it, that the impact we'll have on sustainability will be really, really amazing, because most of the time a phone will die after 3 years, the battery will run out. You can increase that for 3 more years, or after 3 more years, improve the performance. So companies should be aware of that. And also they should allow users to repair autonomously without depending on the technical support from them. Or as the new trending I've been seeing lately this year is to make it so expensive, they make so expensive repair that people say, okay, just buy a new one. So companies should be aware of also of that, and just not say, oh, we are a company that cares about the environment, also to do something about it and show to the users that they can do that. And to finish this, I would like to share with you this one. So this is the repair manifesto from iFixit. And to summarize everything, for me is like, if you can fix it, you don't own it. So that's it. So thank you, everyone. I hope that you repair something someday. And if anybody has questions, we would like to answer them.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, as you said, many times people just buy a new one because it's, or option A is cheaper, or it's kind of the same amount of money that they need to spend in order to have the device working again. And of course, being new one is good. But do you think the companies are the only, between quotes, guilty actor here, that they put high prices to the repair parts or so? For example, we were talking a few talks today before that about developers making applications not so useful for all devices and so on.
Yeah, so I think it's a split thing. So companies do that. So I think we all know big companies that do that. So we are not going to mention them, of course. But so I think like you have that side, and I don't think we can fix that because that's the company side. But we have the user side. So the user side is like, if you go to eBay, if you go to iFixit.com, if you go to many places here in Spain, they have the parts and they are really cheap. So I don't know how many of you think how much costs an iPhone display for, I don't know, for an iPhone XR. I would just say
Exactly, just broke mine.
Okay.
So Apple charged me $299, and the independent shop wanted $195, and exactly XR.
Okay,
You
so
get it right.
that is you have to take into account that someone is doing the repair.
course,
But if you do it by yourself, the display is no more than $80, 80 euros. So, and most of the time they come with the tools to repair. So, for me, if I do a little bit of research, it's not that hard. If you go to YouTube, there's many videos people showing around, putting the links to how to buy the tools and the replacement parts, and show like this is a 10-minute fix. It's going to be cheap. Don't go to the company because, as you mentioned, they will make it really hard for you because, as we all know, they are looking into revenue, so not making it easier for us.
But I was going to say sometimes it's hard to find the original replacement part, and then you use a similar one, but the experience is not the same. And on the top of that, the companies they put this kind of seal that if you try to open or someone else open, like you lost all guarantee. They kind of scare you, right?
That's one of the tactics they do to scare people. But from my experience, I've been able to fix some phones and bring it back to the company, and nothing happened. Because you have to take into account the people who are fixing phones there or fixing laptops, they know as much as we do. What they have the advantage of is the tools. They have really amazing tools that they can do like 5 in a row when you will be doing 1. So sometimes it's just look into the internet and say, okay, this guy on YouTube told me like, oh, you should be taking care of this part. So just follow the steps and you will be okay with that. And about the parts that maybe the quality is low, as mentioned, going to eBay, you can maybe have a low quality part. But if you go to really places that have the reputation to have a good part, that is somewhere to go.
Just adding this, since I use the phone for work, the difference is Apple gives you back to you 2 hours, and the shop did not have the part, did not have any guarantee, and they would only fix it with don't want to offend anyone, like Chinese replacement.
Yeah,
that's like a big problem. If you work with your phone, you can't afford to be 2 days without your phone. It makes no sense. You have to have a replacement.
Yeah, that is one thing that is, I would say, a compromise you do. But for my side, for example, I always say to people, okay, what is the problem? And I say, okay, I order the parts and say, okay, come at this time and we'll fix that side. And from my side, I always try to buy the best quality displays. And I also have to do this. Not everyone is able to know the difference between quality. So I know that some people are more picky, and I get that. So I always ask, like, are you picky or are you not picky? Because if you're like, I don't know, into video editing, I think you're looking to the best quality part. But most people aren't that picky. So it's like, okay, if it works and you can put all the features that come with the original one, I think it works.
I don't know if you saw the latest from Apple that they allow you to rent the tools to fix the screen.
Yeah.
Did you follow, what was that, TechCrunch or no?
Yeah, it wasn't TechCrunch, it was everywhere. But
yeah, okay.
So if you look into it, so if you go, as you mentioned, go to Apple, they will say like how much cost to fix a battery. It will say $69. You say, okay, do it by yourself. Just the part is $71. So it's like, okay, and that is not counting the tools. So if you look into the tools, I look into it because I was really curious.
Mm-hmm.
It costs all of them. This is the minimum to repair the battery, $2,000. Like, are you kidding me? Because they say like, no, if you want to open the display, you need a special tool. I can guarantee you can do it with a hair dryer. Just need to put hot in the edges and you will open. So it's not like you need the most expensive machine to do it. That is not, I know they do that because, as you mentioned, to scare people. But if you look into YouTube, there's many ways to do it without having those expensive tools.
Question. I see that there's a trend, right? And the easy basic part for the users is, cost me too much to repair it. I will not go for this, right? It's the easy calculation and we go like that. What do you think would change that mindset so that this becomes more of the trend rather than the scarcity on the approach?
Yeah, so I would say, as mentioned, two sides. So the first one is from companies, don't solder everything or glue everything because it's really hard for people to fix them. Just do plug and play. If you take a computer 20 years ago, it was really easy to upgrade them because we just open them, we just take away the part and upgrade them, and voila. Now, if you want to upgrade anything, like, okay, I have to go to do some soldering. Also, that is from company side. From user perspective, I would say like put some effort in it because it's like when we have to do the recycling. It's not the easiest way, it's not the most fast way, but it's worth it to do it. So we have to think long term. So most of the time it's like just put a little bit of effort. If you put it on Google like how to fix this device, this problem, most of the time the three main results give you the solution away, and they give you the tools, the video, and how to do it. So I think users should be a little bit more proactive on doing that. And if we, as mentioned, if we start doing it and talk about it, people will say like, oh, it's not that hard. Because as mentioned, many people don't know they can fix stuff. So if you, with your washer, some people think like, I've been fixing washers, like it's really easy. Maybe it's just move a piece, taking it away, and that's it. So that will be my answer.
Yeah, I was going to comment a lot of people don't like to fix, right? They are a bit lazy or they just don't feel equipped. I don't know if there's also a trend or another area of growth of people who likes to fix and fix for others. But another industry growing that it's a little bit better than just buying a new stuff.
If you look into how many users are registered on iFixit, it's like crazy. From 5 years to 6 years now, it went up like really, really hard. Like I remember in Spain, it was really low, the people who were repairing. And 5 years ago, I don't know what happened, but it started to increase the people who were logging in. And on Reddit, for example, also the iFixit Reddit, it went up really, really fast. So it's really getting into also because the European Union is putting some laws in place. For example, they are looking into make companies put repair parts for 10 years. So people are like, oh, for 10 years now I can go back to my company and say, I need this part, and they are by law would like to give you that. So it's increasing, and I think if we keep the momentum, it will extend more rapidly also.
In Belgium, I don't know if it exists in Spain, maybe somewhere but they're called repair cafes. So they're like spaces, community spaces where you can bring your broken devices, and you find usually communities of people that can guide you. Because I find I try sometimes to repair my devices, but you mentioned it's really easy to find quality pieces on or eBay or wherever. And I find this quite difficult because I still have, for example, the window of my camera broken here on my phone. I bought some parts online, but I have no idea if they're good or not, and they're still in their little plastic bag there. I need to find time to do it. But for me, I struggle with this kind of like overcoming the fear of, am I choosing the right parts online, or am I just gonna create more trash? Because I'm never gonna use it and put it in the garbage. And then also like, my phone is not broken. The glass is broken, meaning that I'm creating blurry pictures when I take a photo. But I'm like, at the point of, how do I overcome my fear of breaking more of my device while trying to fix it? I don't know if you had any good suggestions.
Yeah, so as mentioned, one of the things that I do and recommend people to do is go to YouTube. In YouTube, you will find someone with your problem or fixing your problem. And many times on the description, there's like a link to the replacement parts. And also one thing, and because, for example, for the iPhones, everyone knows like iPhone 5S or iPhone X or 13, but they have like this code, it's A and some random number there. That is the way to look into it. So, and that happens with every single phone. They have like serial numbers, but serial numbers are like for that device, but they have a global number for that kind of device. So that's usually what works better to look for pieces.
Mm.
Because
For the YouTube, I did that, but for example, I always thought that you were like setting up this YouTube video showing you how easy it is to replace it to actually sell the kits.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, am I trying to be tricked into buying this kit, or is this real information?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
and that's sometimes that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I empathize with him because I think the value of someone fixing for you is not the fix itself, but it's the shortcut on the experience of what the screen is the best, how to do it in a proper way, and maybe you pay for that, right? But of course, the companies, they overprice the fix. My wife took one day the computer to this authorized service because she spilled sparkling water in the keyboard and it stopped working. And then she lived there and they did an assessment and said, you have to change all the keyboard, all the plates and so on. And then you have to come here this day to really approve the fix with the budget. And then I went there and then we said, let's try to turn on just to see. And then it worked fine because it was dry now, right? So, and they were going to charge a ridiculous amount of money, right?
That's what I was talking about, being skeptical about what they tell you. Because there's like one error from, it's called stage light on some laptops. I'm not gonna mention the company, but they were charging 600 euros to fix that, because it's like, oh, you have to change the display, so that much. And someone randomly found that the only fix you needed was to put the flex cable, instead of going down the swivel, put it in the up, and that was a fix. But the company was charging 600 euros for every single display. And they were not doing the display replacement. They were just doing the flex, moving it up instead of down.
The same flex.
It's the same flex, not they don't even change it. So it's because they designed it really short. So they found like, oh, maybe we should put it in the upside. So that was the only fix.
That's not a crime for some.
Yeah, it's almost that.
Well, that is one thing.
Just one thing, a friend there mentioned the waste. I'm coming from a very interesting experience, changing the light bulbs at my father's house. And you have to understand that the CFR and the lithium batteries are considered dangerous, waste. There is a point from companies that it should not be left in the hands of the user to handle RAE, it's called in Europe, right? I kind of agree. The reason being, my dad just put everything in a shopping bag and literally threw it in the trash, which is bad in more than one ways. Because if he does it, it's one person. But if there's no consciousness of the fact that you're producing special waste, so to speak, it could be a problem. So when companies change the light bulbs, they normally have specialized companies that come and take the waste and really to processing, I would say, because that's literally processing. But when individuals do that, they may not be conscious of the fact that they're producing dangerous waste. So that's actually, I think, a good point that big companies try to make. When they say you can only do this in an official repair center.
Yeah,
and that's, I think, it's a fair point, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Like with batteries, all of them have like the warning, like be careful with that. But sometimes I agree with you. Like maybe some fixes need someone that is qualified for it, but I think they extend that to everything. Like
literally everything.
A phone battery is not that hard to change. You don't need someone that skilled to fix it.
Yeah, but then when do you throw the battery? Where do you throw it? You have to go somewhere and throw it away.
Yeah, what I think, like maybe cities also should take that into account. Like because I don't remember, but many years ago with the pies we have a place to dispose them. I don't see that anymore. There's no that.
In Italy, they're doing that in schools to educate the children.
Exactly.
Which
That's
I don't know
a
if
starting
it's-
point.
But
Yeah.
here in Barcelona, there is places to do that.
But not as extended
not
as
that
because
much.
I remember when I went to the street many years ago, they were everywhere. If you go to the supermarket, they were
Supermarket,
just
yeah.
outside there, and there's no container anymore. So what happened there? Like, we don't do that anymore, or so I think like we can put proper solutions there.
Maybe there is a lobby to
Maybe there is.
get
I don't
rid
know.
of the disposal.
There's also a slight difference.
It's a legal
Alkaline
plan.
batteries are not considered fire hazard for the law. The lion metal batteries are considered fire hazard. You know, because if you go into patinette shop, they can only store so many of them. They have a limit, which is basically a fire hazard.
And we also have a limit on airplanes. So.
Yeah, correct. So there should be something coming out of this that allows single individuals to dispose of waste properly because it's.
But for example, you cannot dispose when you have the phone broken, and we're talking about this, that you cannot repair it, you have the battery inside too. So if you put it in the same place where you should dispose the phone, I mean, I think it's the same problem, if we repair it or if we don't, we have it.
I
Anyway.
completely agree. That's why I keep all my phones in.
I have a collection at home.
I literally have a collection of every phone I own, and my kids play with it. But yeah,
I don't know where to put it.
And companies don't want them. I mean, the last phone I had, that was an iPhone, I tried hard to, I didn't want money, I want Apple, I
Since you
wanted
just take
Apple
it back,
to,
I know.
yeah, I want to take it back, and you, like I'm conscious, I want this phone to be, I don't know, used for parts or recycled or whatever, and they said, no, we don't want it, it's old and we don't want it, and it was not that,
That
I don't
changed,
know.
right? That
Yeah.
they have a recycling program
They're
now?
they're trying to change that. But what I would suggest, like if the company doesn't accept that, go to a repair shop, because most of the time, like I don't want this, but maybe 80% of the pieces will work. So they will say, okay, because I do that when I see people throwing away, like, don't throw it away, give it to me, because I can tear them about, and maybe I don't. The camera works, so I can put it in another phone or another laptop. So I was like, go to a repair shop and say, oh, are you interested in having this one for free?
but I tried in my case, in back market, because this one
Okay.
is second hand, so when I bought in second hand, the same company I bought, because they are like different companies, I gave the other.
Yeah, they do that
Yeah.
because in back market, it's like a marketplace for repair people
Yeah,
to sell refurbished items. So that is also a
Very
good
good.
way.
and it worked for years, second hand.
Yeah, back mark.
Just so for those in Barcelona, the University Polytechnica, I think Barcelona has a program right now where
Yeah.
they're asking people who have old phones to give them because they're doing research on how to recycle the different components. And for the Thoughtworkers, we have a box here in the workshop room where you can drop your dead phones there. We'll collect them and send them to the University of Barcelona. So
That's cool.
Yeah.
Very rich discussion.
So now we know code James, if you need anything, so James is the
I have to
person.
answer.
We still hold a 9 years old iPhone 5S.
All right. I think that concludes the summit itself. A couple of takeaways. So the event, it's being recorded. It's going to be available online. There's food coming up, so please stay for a bit, network, mingle, get to know each other. And yeah, all this is amazing. It's something that the first point that maybe I want to improvise with is the fact that we're getting there, right? Many things are not perfect yet. Maybe we can fall back to the Agile Prime Directive here, right? We're doing the best we can with the information that we have and in the context that everyone is, right? A lot of this climate action initiatives also has to do with social justice, right? And not everyone's context is the same in order to be on board or at the same level on this, right? The second one is, the second point that I like to highlight is that in IT specifically, we're talking about two big buckets of how to address this problem. we're talking about sustainability of IT and the sustainability by IT. And in a nutshell, of IT is mostly what we've heard today, right? How do we make our infrastructure in the cloud more efficient, or we amortize embodied carbon throughout 5 years and not 3. And by IT is how we use technology to improve real world processes. Let's say, how do we optimize supply chains, for example, that in 2020 they proved to be quite vulnerable. And yeah, and I think that's it. So thank you all so much, and please join us in the hallway. I'm really glad you enjoyed it. We're not glad you made it, because very nice questions and very nice comments.
I really like this topic. It's really interesting and important.
Gracias, Daniel.
Okay.
Buenísimo.
Congrats to you too.
Así.
Yeah, I would definitely think that we need to.
Yeah, we can mute this.
Oh yeah.